If you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, well thank you so much for coming out. My name is Nathan Garris. I'm the Resilient Landscapes Project Manager for the Applegate Partnership and
One second, Nate.
Oh.
Sorry. Yep. Sorry to interrupt.
I forgot. We're doing a little bit of adjusting. So we're gonna have BurnBot, they have a masticator piece of equipment. They're gonna do a demonstration out back at 11:30 now, or 11:45, sorry. So after this presentation, so you can look out for that. We're also gonna have kids demonstrations going on right now, and Smokey will come out afterwards, after the presentation as well. So just a couple announcements. Thank you, Nate.
I think I'm still going to try without the mic, but we'll see how this goes. Let me know if you can't hear me and I'll pick up the mic. So once again, my name is Nathan Garris. I'm the Resilient Landscapes Project Manager for the Applegate Partnership and Watershed Council. And one of my projects is updating the Applegate Fire Plan. So I want to thank the U.S. Forest Service Community Wildfire Defense Grant and the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board Stakeholder Engagement Grant for funding this effort. I also want to thank SOFRIC for being a partner in this effort, contracting with them, and a Greater Applegate and Tucker's really helping out too. And of course, the Applegate Fire Department. So with no further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to start very, very basic. This is probably too simple for a lot of the people in the room, but I wanted to show the fire behavior triangle. So these are the three factors that determine how a fire is going to, the rate of spread, the intensity, all of that. So we're looking at weather, how hot is it, how dry is it, what's the wind, what's the relative humidity, topography, is this fire burning on flat, is it going uphill, is it going downhill, is there a canyon channeling the winds, and the fuels. And if you're looking at that triangle, we can't do anything about the weather, we can't do anything about the topography. The only part of this triangle we have any impact on at all is the fuel. What is this fire actually burning? So that's what we're going to focus on with the Community Wildfire Protection Plan update. And some of the reasons why we need this update. Well, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but we obviously have an increasingly large fire footprint. The fires are getting bigger. We're having longer fire seasons. The fire behavior is more intense than it was historically. There's more of us living out here. The wildland-urban interface is expanding. And as I'm sure a lot of the firefighters can attest, our resources are being pretty stretched when it comes to firefighting. So the Applegate CWPP, it actually has an amazing legacy, and we're trying to innovate off of that. Back in 2001, the Quartz Fire came in, and it really frightened a lot of the residents. Well, got the attention of a lot of the residents here in the Applegate. And Sandy Schaefer, Jack Shipley, and Diana Kugel got together, and in 2002, they made the Applegate Fire Plan. It was the very first community wildfire protection plan in the nation. It didn't come out of Washington, D.C., it didn't come out of the state of California, it came out of Applegate, which I think is pretty amazing. So it shows that we've got a lot of innovation happening out here in the valley. So with this update, we're trying to fulfill all the state and federal requirements, obviously, but we're also trying to get public input through a survey that's been put together. We're also looking at community resilience through the Resiliency Hub work that Tucker's doing, Firewise community work that the Firebrand is putting together out here. And then we're using this Vibrant Planet tool that is going to really help us with the planning and analysis of the watershed and what we need to do out here. So what is a community wildfire protection plan? To be effective, it has three federal requirements. The first one is we have to coordinate with the agencies. So we're engaging these agencies through the stakeholder surveys and meetings. And agencies are BLM, Forest Service, ODF. 70% of the Applegate watershed is public land. So we definitely need to have agencies at the table and working with us, otherwise we're ignoring most of the risk and most of the opportunity. The other requirement for a CWPP is planning and prioritization of fuels treatment projects. So this is both on public and private land. So we're looking at we've got limited resources. How can we be cost effective with the limited resources we have? Where can we get the biggest bang for our buck? And we're also trying to take what we're hearing from the residents, from the public, what their priorities are, and what the agency priorities are, and trying to find a happy middle. And then the third requirement is recommendations for landowners, both private landowners and public land managers, for activities they can do to reduce wildfire risk on their property. This can include year-round maintenance activities. So here's the watershed we're talking about. It's 500,000 acres. Once again, 70% of it is public land, and there's a lot of variation between the communities. So we figured that one good way to look at this watershed is to break it into 6 regions, 5 neighborhoods, and then the southern end, which is basically Forest Service. Because we kind of figured that the residents of Williams might have a different view of what they want to have happen on their landscape than maybe the residents of Rouge would. So we wanted to break them into distinct communities and move forward that way. So where are we in this timeline? So in the fall, we had our first round of public meetings. In January, we had our second round of public meetings. And now we're right here. We're about to head into our third round of public meetings. That'll be happening in April and the first week of May. Then we'll have the draft document that'll be going out for edits and publishing, and we hope to have everything done in September of this year. And then going forward, we'll revisit this document annually to make sure it still is working for everybody. As I mentioned, the public meetings coming up. We really wanted to have people come out and have their voices heard, so here's the upcoming meetings. I also have them listed over here on the table that we're at PWC, so if you want any more information about the meeting locations, dates, times, please come over and talk to me after this. So what is the progress to date with this Applegate CWPP? Well, we've been doing, there's 3 components that we're trying to collect right now. We have this public survey that is going to be available until April 1st. We have a community mapping exercise that happened already earlier this year, and then we have a stakeholder survey that's out that the agencies and other stakeholders are filling out. So that includes community organizations, government entities, and local businesses. So once again, we're done with the community mapping exercise. The public survey is open, but ends April 1st, and we're pretty much done with the stakeholder survey too. So all this is being fed into this Vibrant Planet system. And also to let you know, we have 244 survey responses to date. It'd be really nice to get that number up. There's 15,000 of us living in the Applegate Valley. If 244 people are making the decisions for the other 14,800 people, it'd be nice to get some of those other 14,000 people to take this survey. It takes about 5 minutes, so please have your voice heard. So this was the community mapping exercise back in October of 25. We had these laminated maps, there's one of them over there on the table, and people took felt markers and they drew on the map, where is some area where they think there's some Doug-fir mortality that needs to be mitigated? Where are some evacuation routes that could use some help being protected? Where are some important biodiversity areas? Where's their favorite swimming hole? Where's their favorite fishing hole? And all that information was taken in and made this kind of somewhat messy map, but we're just trying to, once again, get as many types of public input as possible so that it can be reflected in this document. The color coding here is for biodiversity areas, areas of Doug-fir mortality, egress and ingress routes, all kinds of different things, recreation. So once again, all this information is being taken and fed into this Vibrant Planet decision platform. It's this decision tool that really is helping us visualize the whole 500,000 acres of the Applegate, what the current conditions are, and where resources can be used to have the biggest benefit for reducing the risk and improving the resiliency. And the neat thing about this tool too is that you can run one scenario, and if it doesn't quite come up with the results you want, you can run another one, and another one, and another one. It's a very powerful tool that can let you iterate multiple times. So let's switch back to the public survey just briefly and get some initial findings from that. So just some general findings. One of the things that was really good to see is that the majority of respondents support fuels reduction. That can include commercial treatments and prescribed fire. The 2 things that motivate residents the most to do work on their land would be financial assistance and to improve their community safety. And the values that people value the most out here, because we have 8 values that we had listed: assets, safety, and water. So assets are structures, your home, your infrastructure, your cell phone towers. Safety and is community safety, and then water is surface water. All right. And so we had some questions in there about evacuation preparedness, and it was really nice to see that 62% of the respondents said they have a go bag ready during fire season. That was amazing. But some other people wrote in things that just like, I have a list of crucial things I'm gonna grab on my way out. That's probably not the best scenario because adrenaline is a strange drug. You don't want to be reading a list and going around to different dressers. Having a go bag ready is the way to go. It was great to see 62% of people are there already. 30% of people have an evacuation plan. It'd be nice if more than 30% did, and also having an evacuation plan is great, but having an evacuation plan that goes in two different directions. Because if your evacuation plan is to head east and the fire's east of you, that's not a good plan. And then we found out that only 15% of people have ever practiced that evacuation plan, which would really be nice to get that number up because coordinating your family members, what are you gonna do with your pets? How are you gonna get your meds? All the important documents, and just communication when the power's out and your cell phone's not working. Practice. Don't just have a plan, practice your plan. We'd like to get these numbers up. So then we looked at how do people perceive the overall wildfire risk on their landscape. So this is ranked from 1 at the low end where they don't think there's much risk at all to 4 is the most extreme risk. So the respondents so far said that they see the highest risk around their home, and then the landscape around their home, and then their community. Not too many people see a risk around their business or agricultural property, and that could be because maybe not many people own a business in the Applegate. There's not a whole lot of commercial land out here. And then we were asking about what were some of the preferred wildfire risk reduction treatment options. So manual is just mastication, hand piling and burning, no commercial harvest. 81% of respondents said they support that. 49% said they supported commercial harvest. 58% said prescribed fire. 16% said another category in there, and only 2% of respondents so far have said that they don't want to see any treatments on the landscape. So you can see there's very strong support for treatments on the landscape to reduce wildfire risk. And what would motivate people to do some of this work? This is listed from 1 to 10, 10 being the biggest motivator. So once again, we're coming back to community safety. People really want to do something that helps their neighbors, which is great to hear. Financial assistance, that makes sense. This work is very expensive. People getting a little bit of that cost offset would encourage them to do more work. Free property assessments there, possible changes to home insurance policy. I'm hearing that from a lot of residents as they're getting notes from their insurance company where they're losing their insurance or the rates are going up dramatically. Some other people are concerned about forest health because we've done fire exclusion out here for over a century, so our stands are pretty overstocked and pretty unhealthy. The natural disturbance pattern that everything out here evolved with has been broken for a long time now. And then also there's some people would say that if new zoning laws came in from the city or the county that require you to do defensible space, that could be a motivator for some. And then there was some other in here as far as like community-wide action and things. Nope, go that way. And then when I was mentioning these values, here's the 8 values that we have listed in the survey that feed directly into that Vibrant Planet tool. So it's assets. This is residential and commercial structure. It's basically buildings, but also your transportation infrastructure. Then there's safety, which is defensible space work, emergency service facilities, evacuation routes. Then we're getting into surface water, overall wildlands health, biodiversity, science and culture. So like monitoring stations, historic Key Bridge is a cultural spot. Recreation, we have a lot of that out here. And then ecological commodities such as timber orchards and timber and seed orchards. So you can see that the number one motivator is assets, then safety, then water, and then it drops off fairly quickly. So how are we using Vibrant Planet? This is where we get into the nitty-gritty. First off, let's define some terms. Wildfire hazard. The hazard of a wildfire hazard is the likelihood that a fire is going to happen and the predicted intensity of that fire. Those two combined is your wildfire hazard. How likely is it going to happen, and if it happens, how bad is it going to be? And then you look at risk. Risk is those assets, those 8 assets we're talking about, and how that hazard affects those assets. That's your risk. Is a fire 2 miles away or 20 feet away? And then we're also looking at treatment effectiveness, because not every treatment is as effective as every other one. And there's some treatments that may not be appropriate in certain areas, like maybe herbicide or commercial harvest aren't appropriate in certain areas, so we can turn those parts off. It's a very powerful tool. So people have probably seen this map. We've gone past this now. This is very preliminary information that came out. This was based on the public survey, and we came up with some potential project areas throughout the watershed. This is very, very preliminary. This has changed up now. We're trying to figure out the best way to make it equitable across the entire landscape. And one of the things we've settled on is, rather than trying to do an equal acreage treatment in each of the 5 neighborhoods, we'll look at the risk reduction and resilience opportunities. So we try to get the same effective risk reduction in each one, but different treatment, acreage treatment numbers. So it gets a little bit complicated in there, but we're trying to be equitable across the whole landscape. And then the other thing we just started looking at this week is perhaps analyzing everything based on those safety and assets, which are kind of the WUI values. We're talking structures, defensible space. Do one analysis of that, do another analysis of all the other kind of biodiversity values, and then another analysis of the stakeholder, and that's right here. So as we said before, the public survey data is coming into the Vibrant Planet, the community mapping data, and the stakeholder survey. And then we're using that data to kind of analyze in 3 different ways. We're looking at prioritizing around safety around the WUI. We're looking at all the biodiversity and historical values on the rest of the landscape. And we're looking at the stakeholder responses, and we're seeing where those 3 analyses overlap. Where is the spot where all 3 of those say this is an important spot to do work? And that's where we're going to prioritize work. Once again, we've got a big problem and a small amount of resources. We're trying to put the resources where they'll do the most good for the most people. So let's get into the actual document itself. The document has not been written yet. We're still working on it. Amelia Wasofrick is the primary author, and she's doing an amazing job. So the first chapter is kind of going to be about the history of wildfire in the Applegate, our current conditions, and the current risks. So we're looking at what's the environment like here in the Applegate? What are the social characteristics of the Applegate? What is the wildfire hazard currently? What is the risk to the community, the infrastructure, and the locally valued resources? And then we're going to also look at what types of fuel treatments, prescribed fire, and other things that we can do to improve forest health out here. The second section of the CWPP will be about proposed priority projects. That's a lot of P's. So these are, once again, going to be distributed throughout the watershed. We're trying to have equitable risk reduction across the entire watershed, not equitable acreages, but equitable risk reduction. We're also trying to figure out what the potential costs, timelines, and expected outcomes would be for a bunch of different scenarios in these project areas, so that we can figure out. Someone like myself who's a grant writer, it really helps me to know, like, okay, this is the area you probably should be working in, and here's some of your potential costs and some of your potential treatments. It really streamlines that whole process of trying to go after some money. The final section of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan document will be the community resilience strategy, and this also breaks down in kind of 3 categories. There's the before an event happens, so that's when we're doing the defensible space work. That's when we're making buffers along egress and ingress routes. That's when we're putting landowners in touch with resources to do home hardening. Everything we can do to get as prepared for an event as possible. Then there's a smaller section, which is like kind of response during an event. So one of the things we've noticed here with the last 2 Upper Applegate fires is the power goes off, people can't communicate, and they really want information. So what do? They drive down to the fire department, and they park in front of the rollaway doors, and they block the fire rigs in, and they go in and tell me what's going on. Well, that's not very great, because you're getting in the way of the firefighters. So the work that Tucker's doing in AGA is resiliency hubs, areas maybe over at the Rouge School or somewhere else where they can have the Starlink set up and a battery backup, so you can charge your phone and get in touch, get on the internet, figure out everything. But you're not blocking the firefighters. You're not keeping them from doing their job. And then a really big component that I think gets overlooked in a lot of these plans is after the event, how do we get back up on our feet? How do you keep people in the valley if they've lost their housing? How do you keep the schools functioning if the kids are elsewhere? How do you keep the businesses going when we're a tourism-based economy if everything's burned and people are like, well, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to the vineyard. I don't want to go jump off a wood rat and paraglide. That's going to be really important. So the social, economic, and environmental recovery is, I mean, we're a tourism-based economy. It's going to be very important to get those back up and running. So we're trying to plan out the different ways, and a lot of people in this room here has been very helpful in us trying to figure out how we recover from an event. Because we're very different than Talent and Phoenix. There's resources that they had after the Alameda fire that we will not have. There isn't the housing available around here. There's just a whole lot of things that we're kind of a unique area because we're spread across 2 states, 3 counties, and 3 fire districts. There's a lot of moving parts out here.
With no municipal infrastructure.
Yes, with no incorporating municipalities. There are, so yes, we're a very unique scenario out here. Yeah.
So in regards to that equity, outsized impact as opposed to equal acreage. So for example, like, let's say doing a treatment, regardless of what the treatment might be, of 5 acres on wood rat, it has the potential to reduce wildfire risk to, let's say, a few hundred homes. And so an equal equity of that would be something in, let's say, the Applegate, it might only be 3 acres, but it has the exact same outsized impact on, let's say, 100 homes for wildfire preparedness.
Yeah, very, very, very similar. Yeah, we're looking at it, the risk reduction number as opposed to an acreage number. That's because we don't want to do a thing where we're like, well, we have to treat, not have to, but let's say set a target of 1,500 acres in each one of these neighborhoods. Well, maybe there's only 1,200 acres that are really needed in one neighborhood that you're doing 300 acres of treatment that could be used somewhere else, that would be better somewhere else. So we're just trying to figure out a way to make it equitable without trying to just chase acres, if that makes sense. And this should look very familiar, but I'm just trying to reinforce that this is where we're at right now. The 3rd round of public meetings is coming up. We'd really like people to come out. We'd really like people to take the survey and have their voice heard. It's only going to be open until April 1st. So my final slide here, please come out to one of these meetings. If you can't, there'll be a virtual option. There's a QR code and a URL here for the survey. It takes you 5 to 10 minutes to fill it out. It would really be nice to get those numbers up over 244, up maybe even up to 2,000. Maybe we could have a quarter of the people out here make the decision for the other 3/4, as opposed to a 1% making the decision for everybody else. So, yeah, definitely. Please. So that's what I've got. I figured that there'd probably be some questions, so I wanted to leave a little bit of time at the end if there. Go ahead.
Okay, how much are you interfacing with BLM?
What-
Because frankly, we could do, everybody here and
Yep.
in the neighborhood could do everything to
Yes.
mitigate risk, and we would still get wiped out by fire because the BLM is growing fuels.
Yes, and once again, 70% of the Applegate Valley is public land, so we have this stakeholder survey out that they have filled out with their priorities, and we're having a meeting with them next week where we're going to go over what are their potential projects they have planned out over the next 10 years. How can we do some cross-boundary work? Because myself, I work for the Watershed Council, and all my work's on private land. But once again, this private land butts up to BLM land, so they're planning out some linear treatments along the property lines. On the BLM side of property lines, doing linear treatments, do a buffer, 100 feet, 200 feet in. But also one of the things I would say that I'm kind of new to this sort of work, but one of the things that really surprised me is it's far more likely for a fire to start on private land and go onto public land than it is for start on public land and go into private land. We are actually a bigger threat to the public land than they are to us, which is kind of crazy, but it's, when you look at how the fires happen.
Here it's true.
People are idiots, they've set the fires, that we've had 2 big fires the last 2 years.
Yeah, and more shanty too.
So kind of related to
Yeah.
that question, you have the map up there of the project areas.
Uh-huh.
You can pull it up if you like. Well, it said potential.
Potential,
A lot of
yeah,
that
and
must
this has
cover-
changed.
It must cover federal land.
Yes.
So where did that information come from? Is that something Wildfire Planet did? Are these projects that Forest Service?
Yes, so with Vibrant Planet, with the way, and once again, this has changed dramatically. What this is based off of is Vibrant Planet has a LiDAR. You're familiar with LiDAR? It's from the overflights. So they have a modeled plant layer. And looking at that and the way that the topography works and some very sophisticated pyroanalytica, which is another company model that goes into that, it says if a fire starts here, what's likely behavior and various things like, and that was the initial analysis. And then we put the public survey data in there where people said, my number one priority is safety and assets. And just with that, this is where the potential project areas came up with. This doesn't have the stakeholder survey data in it yet, and we've actually changed the way we're analyzing this now. Whereas I said before, we're looking at like the safety and the assets and doing analysis for that. Then we're doing an analysis for all the other kind of biodiversity values, and then we're doing an analysis for the stakeholder values, and we're seeing where those three overlap and saying anywhere where all three of those agree saying this is an important area to work, that's obviously an important area to work.
So,
Yeah.
well, just for example, like you've got the upper Applegate area there, where there's projects identified.
Yep.
That really is, all that means is that the Vibrant Planet has identified it as a high-risk area. Is that all that means?
High risk and also high opportunity for resiliency. So what it's saying is if you do work here, not only will you reduce the wildfire risk, but you're going to probably increase forest health. And resources would be better spent in these areas than other areas on the landscape based on the values we put into the tool at this time. We're now doing it slightly differently, but that's what we're trying to figure out is, yes, we've got a limited amount of resources and a very big problem. Ideally, we'd like to treat the entire landscape. We're not going to be able to do that.
You don't need to treat the entire
Yes.
landscape.
And even if we wanted to, we couldn't. We don't have the resources, so. Yeah.
In the upcoming next round of public meetings, the final round of public meetings, you have obviously not the final map because everybody will still be putting input until April 1st. But will in the slides have a more updated map?
Yes, I used this map because this is the map that was used in the second round of public meetings, and this is a map that went out in an Alligator article. So I wanted to have this one up on the screen so people can see it, but realize that this is not going to be the map that goes into the document itself. And we haven't written the document yet, so if you hear from people that, oh, it's got so or so in it, that's not true because it hasn't been written yet, so no one could say what's in it because it doesn't exist yet. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, you just said we would like to treat the entire landscape, and that's not true. We've got strategies and evidence and scientific information that indicates if you treat between 25 and 40% of the landscape, you substantially reduce the risk. We do not need to treat every part of the landscape. There are important areas that need to be retained because they're good habitat, they're near streams, and the idea is to break up the landscape so fire doesn't have a continuous wall of trees. It's not that everything, we would like to see every home treated around it. That I would say 100%, every home treated. But we do not need to treat the entire landscape.
Yeah.
And that's like something that doesn't get out there enough for people to understand.
I think if Slater Fire had treatments, that it might not have been as voracious as it was as eating up everything in its path.
Exactly.
You agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess when I said it would be great to treat I meant like in an ideal world where we had unlimited resources and unlimited time, I personally, I could see, okay, fine, I stand corrected. But
We have dense stands of old growth that need to be retained, that they're good habitat. We need both kinds of stands. We need open stands, a certain percentage, and we need dense stands to, if we're gonna have the biodiversity and all the habitat that we want. And, you know, think of the Red Buttes where there's really beautiful habitat and it's structurally diverse.
yeah, but the fire return interval was still once every 20 years or so, and there hasn't been a disturbance in 150.
But it would be an understory burn. And
Yeah.
the work we do would actually protect that old growth around. If you treat around it where it's a high priority, low elevation, self slope, you could protect some of those upper areas that are one of the
Yeah.
reasons we live here are the beautiful old growth forests.
Yeah.
So,
But an underburn doesn't hurt an old growth, I guess is what I was saying. That by treatment, I wasn't saying like harvest per se, but like it'd be great to go out there with a drip torch if the conditions allowed, which the conditions currently do not allow. Oh, go ahead, David.
Yeah, just to iterate kind of what you both are saying too. In regards to these polygons and those highlights and stuff, there's a variety of different types of treatment. That could be no treat. It could be underburn. It could be remove the brush. It doesn't even necessarily mean that a tree is coming down. Just to reiterate that treatments is a very, very broad statement. I mean, I have examples over here from blackberry being an extreme fire risk. One started on the other side of the property across from us. So treatment doesn't mean cutting down trees. And in those polygons in Vibrant Planet, there are recommendations with estimated opportunity costs as well. And like we said, we have 15,000 people across 500,000 acres, and we are extremely underfunded in this community. And so it's not a one size fits all on there, and that's not demonstrated in this slide. But yeah, treatment doesn't necessarily mean trees being cut, and it doesn't mean any action is going to take place within a specific forest area. There are recommendations and suggestions for our circumstances to be able to utilize what we have the best we can for the betterment of the community.
Yep. I'd be pleasantly surprised if we could treat 20% of the landscape. Go ahead.
So there's a source of money
Mm-hmm.
to treat huge amounts. Much more, I don't know how big's your budget?
Right now I have 2 ODF small forest fund grants we just signed the grant agreement for that are, so that's about $500,000, and then I've got $2 million in IRA funding.
I was checking this morning, and it looks like Oregon spends between 200 and 500 million a year on forest fire fighting.
Yep.
We probably have a third of it. So we've got 100 million or so of that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we've got such overgrowth forests is we've stopped logging.
True.
And if we were to log, we're gonna have a lot of people that have the money to go out, and if you had a teamwork with the firefighters and folks like you and the logging to take that tremendous amount of overgrowth out and maybe cut places where the fire would normally climb over and go. There's some strategic thinking that can go on to stop the fires once they get started. And quite honestly, I think everybody in this valley that went out and cleaned out around their house and was nice, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
But it's nothing compared with being able to get a cat in and close the fire, stop the fire, but get the wood out by having the economic availability of people logging. And it goes from here all the way to the coast. I mean, look at that big green spot to your, on that direction. I don't know how many people were alive when they had the Tillamook burn.
I wasn't around for that one, but I lived in Astoria and I would hear a lot of stories about it.
You could drive from Portland to Seaside and literally drive for 45 or 50 minutes through nothing but burned out stuff.
Yep.
And I think we are teeing this up in Southern Oregon. And we're just waiting for that combination of dryness and coming and a lightning shot or whatever. And if we were to have logging and have the roads to get the cats in, and turn out the loggers used to be the best firefighters because they were already there. And they don't want to have their economic. So the argument about we have no money is we're not. And then unless you guys are hand in glove with the BLM and they've got federal money, I don't
We're
see
trying.
I don't know how, you know.
Well, so a couple of points that I'd like to address. I think that logging plays a good component. But some of our past forest practices with the plantations, the tight spacing, that's led to increased fire danger. So it's not a silver bullet. It's if you do it properly. And then when you're talking about strategic locations, we call them pods, potential operational delineations. So we're talking linear features like roadways and rivers, streams, but also ridge lines. It's not in this map, but that pods is one of our new we're including pods in the WUI. So like Carberry Road will be a pod because you could catch a fire there. But aside from catching a fire, you can also safely stage personnel there and do a back burn. That's the other thing. Is one of the things we learned with the first Upper Applegate fire that was on Boaz Mountain, the density of the forest and the amount of snags there made it unsafe to put a hand crew in. So what they did is they did a back burn through there because it wasn't safe to put people on the ground. So yeah, I agree 100%. Getting the ridge lines, getting the roadways, and then the other thing with that is if you already have these egress-ingress routes and these pods already buffered out and protected as well as you can. We can't make them asbestos. We can't fireproof the woods, but do as much as we can. When you have a fire crew coming in from Arkansas or Alabama or Alaska that doesn't know the area, and you can load on their Avenza that here's where you can safely stage resources. Here's the ridge line that would be good to stake out a crew on. Here's the ridge line you shouldn't stake out a crew on. Here's and then that goes also into, it's a little bit off, but there's like Community Connect. It's a website that you can talk to a firefighter, but it's a website that becomes available once an emergency is declared, and you can put your stuff on there like, what's your gate code? Where is your propane tank located? Do you have a family member that has a medical issue that's going to need help evacuating? Do you have an aggressive livestock dog? Do you have a medical device that requires power? All that stuff you put in there, and then that becomes available. There's all kinds of wonderful things going into this.
You mentioned earlier that the biggest starting was human.
Yes.
Yet, I don't know, I'd love to see published in the newspaper the reasons that people started fires for the last 5 years. What happened? Was it backyard barbecue? Was it, we had a neighbor across the street decided to clear out a bunch of brush. Nice, good.
Yeah.
They started to burn it. They put it under the tree. How many times we had a guy, 2 years ago, start a fire with the mowing,
Yep.
right? And it went 4 to 5 miles. It was about 1.5 miles from our place. It came right down the line. We all knew the bad judgment, or whatever you want to call it, and just pounded that into people. This will burn you up.
Yeah.
And if one of your goals could be, I want to cut the human-started fire by 50%.
Yeah.
That would it's stopping the fire. We say it's going to be a fire, and it's sort of it's just always going to happen. Well, we can stop it from happening.
Yeah.
At least a good part of it. And I need you guys to be, we don't want to take these people out and put them in the yard. That's not, we don't want their names, we don't want distribution, but we want to be knowledgeable. The one that happened last year, nobody's ever talked about it.
It's ongoing. That's the other thing, that the fire investigations usually take 2 to 3 years, so you don't know the results until well after the event. And then,
Now, if you were in business, if you have this kind of a problem, it's going to take 2 or 3 years. You'd fire everybody that was associated with it. You can figure out to a pretty good expectation what the heck happened in 2 or 3 weeks.
But the thing is,
the government loves to pull out 22 regulations and say, well, we have all the departments and they all have to sign. Come on, you're talking about burning people up.
The other thing is that you don't want to come out and say that Joe Schmo started this fire for this reason, and then it turns out that after further investigation that it didn't happen that way. So that's why they're so
the top 3 estimated things, and these all potentially can cause what caused the Paradise fires, what caused the huge fire in the middle of California, Oregon last year. How do these get started? And if we could cut it by 50%, and everybody knew what dumb things somebody did. I'm worried I'm going to be the dumb one someday.
And some of it is like it's a seized brake on your trailer. It's you didn't quite secure that chain. When my coworkers saw a guy dragging the chain on the way so you can't litigate stupid. It's a weird thing. But the other thing I want to say about human cause versus natural fire, when you're talking about a lightning strike, it's quite often at the top of the ridge line, and fire doesn't come downhill very quickly. Human cause fires generally are in the valley floor, and as we've been talking about, heat rises, so that the fire is preheating the fuels ahead of it as it goes up the hill, and it runs up the hills. So human-caused fires are bad in a number of ways, in that generally they're either starting in a neighborhood or on an egress and ingress route, and generally they're burning uphill, versus natural fires, which are generally starting in the wilderness and burning downhill slowly. And so yes, I agree 100% that the human-caused fires are the big, and we're going to have recommendations in there, like follow the fires, but we've had a number of people that they're mowing when they shouldn't be, they're barbecuing when they shouldn't be, they throw out a cigarette, there's hundreds of different ignition sources, and it's just kind of like, please use your common sense.
If you could make a list.
Yeah.
Of real fires, not telling the names, not telling the exact location, so you don't get the retribution. But this is what started your fire.
Yeah.
These three things.
All right, sorry, I gotta jump in here.
Okay.
We're running out of time here. So any closing remarks from you, Nate, before we?
No, just please come out to the public meetings. Please take the survey. We really want to have your voice reflected in this document. That's all I got.
And Nate, do you want to go back to those dates just so folks
Oh,
can?
sure, not a problem.
Also, another reason why we're cutting off here, there's going to be a demonstration of the mastication machine that BurnBot is using out back, so that's going to be quite loud. If I was you, I would maybe go check that out. It's pretty cool, and then I would go get some lunch from the smoker out back. We'll be back at noon for a presentation on insurance, homeowners insurance, and wildfire risk from Fire Brand Resiliency Collective. Thank you.
I mean, score just out, you know that. You know, like, but also, I don't know, it's very flexible. I really like it.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
No worries, no worries.
So while I can open yours,